On today's show, we're going to be talking about a dynamic leader in smart parking solutions. And with a proven track record, Matt brings valuable insights into how communities can better manage unregistered vehicles, keep resident satisfaction, and drive the real NOI. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us a bit about your journey and what led you to discuss and really focus on parking within multifamily industry.
Sure. So I'm going to tell you a nice little story. And I don't know if you know this, but one of the reasons why we started Parking Pass and on-call parking was because I was an unauthorized occupant, actually living in a unit. I was living with an ex-girlfriend of mine. I was parking two vehicles there. There was a gate system, but there was no like real control of who's supposed to be there. I wasn't on the lease. I was living there. I was parking there.
Interesting.
I was part of the problem, right? So that's how it kind of started. And then I have an uncle of mine who is kind of familiar with the towing industry. Him and I worked together to kind of engineer like a parking solution. And we started, I grew up in Detroit, right? Worked in the automotive industry for a little bit. So I had a bit of a tech background. But Mark and I decided to kind of kick off the parking solutions down in South Florida. So that's where we began the journey. And now we're in over 30 states. So from a software perspective, we've got over 30 states where they're using our parking solution. And then from a patrol perspective, I do Atlanta, Denver, and a lot of the major markets in Florida for my on-call parking. So it's pretty
Awesome.
so it's exciting. So it's,
Awesome.
yeah, it's great.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats on that.
Yeah.
So, let's dive into the biggest challenges that the properties face with parking and residents
Mhm.
and non residents
Mhm.
and visitors, right? And knowing that the parking ratio is definitely one of the biggest challenges that it's ongoing for any developer. I think not just in Florida in this market. What would you say, your company brings to those big time challenges?
Well, I think one of the things, right? I mean, and it's understandable why the percentages, right, would be so low, right, as far as like how much parking space availability they have, because it's expensive, right? I mean, talk about down here in Miami, right? The real estate's super high end and it's, hard to kind of maintain. So these guys want to maximize their doors more than they want to maximize necessarily their parking lot, right? So if you build some big parking lot, well, now you're taking away from maybe some of the potential rent revenue, right? So I
Correct.
think a lot of the developers recognize that. Some of the cities don't have really stringent rules, or their rules are pretty, their ratios are pretty low comparatively of what you would expect maybe for properties to
Yes.
some of their sizes. So it poses a big challenge, right? And I think that a lot of the clients struggle with kind of understanding, how are we going to do this, right? I think a lot of people resort to kind of more traditional models of, hey, hang tags, parking stickers. Let me just call up my tow company. Let me see if they can just provide me a solution. And,
Right.
sometimes that can work, sure, but there's just so many different layers and so many moving parts that happen on a property, where really having like a digital parking solution to help manage that makes
Mhm.
their life a lot easier. Because now, let's just take me as like the example, right? I was the unauthorized occupant. So now, like when, I'm signing a lease and I have somebody that's living with me that's not supposed to be, well, our digital solution will help track that, right? Where otherwise, I might come into the leasing office, say, hey, can you give me a new sticker? I traded in my car. I lost it. I don't know what happened to it, right? No harm, no foul. They give me an extra sticker. Well, now I just stuck that on my window, right?
And that's
I mean,
it.
are the towing vendors or security vendors going to go one by one and really validate the sticker number to make sure it's on their spreadsheet? I mean, not really,
Not
right?
really.
These guys, they're paid to tow cars, they're paid to boot cars, they're paid for their time. They're not going to go that extra mile, right? So that's where, there's gaps in how people are kind of managing things, and that's why the digital solutions are, the better way to kind of go. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, how does your solution help manage the overall, right? And optimize the parking availability?
Yeah.
How does the product help on those areas and filling up those gaps
Yeah.
that we know that are there?
I think the first thing is, it starts with how we do our audit of who's actually supposed to be there and what cars are supposed to be registered there and stuff like that, right? So our team will help use like the rent rolls and the property management systems to understand, okay, who are the people that are on the lease, and then as a part of our application process, the residents actually self-register online, and they're providing, and it's custom for the clients, but they're typically providing their driver's license, registration, and the insurance.
Okay.
So these three pieces of information really help the property management team and our team understand, hey, this person actually belongs, they're on the lease, or like, hey, we just checked the registration on this vehicle, we just checked the insurance, and this is somebody we have no idea who this is, right? So it's helping with that initial conversation of understanding, okay, who's actually supposed to be here, right? So that's part of the solution, right? The other piece is we have a digital guest pass system, right? Fully customizable by the clients on what they want to do. So with that guest pass system, they can set limits and controls by the license plates or by the units. So when the residents are forced to register these cars because there's regular enforcement going on in the evening, well, now we start to weed out some of the bad apples, right? We start to
That's
figure out,
right.
okay, who's there that's not supposed to be, because now you ran out of your days. Well, who's that person? Like, we'd love to know who that is,
That's
right?
right.
So, it's one of those things where we've gone through and, it's helped with the solution to kind of help solve it for our
Okay.
clients. Yeah. It's
And
part of
what
the process.
about what we all want to do, right? And drive that NOI and see how we could drive that NOI, and the owners
Yeah.
and the investors could obviously see that impact. How does the product support that as well?
So it's actually really, there's a lot of different solutions, and I can touch on some of them.
Hmm.
So one of our business models is we allow the residents to pay for the parking program through our online website. Where that's helpful sometimes for our asset owners is, we don't have to go through like the nickel and dime approach necessarily, where they have to put it on, as an additional line item on their rent if they don't want to. But it allows us some flexibility also to increase the costs of these programs, right? To generate some extra income on the resident permit side back to the asset owners. Of course, there's also clients that want to do it on their end, right? Where we invoice them, they charge it back to the residents, and then it provides like a value add for them, and then maybe they group it as part of like a tech package, right? But there's those revenue streams and those models there on the resident parking side. On the guest parking side, surprisingly, we've seen a lot of our garden style properties that have started to get into more of the charged parking. Now,
Okay.
what they'll do, we have a lot of flexibilities in our tool, but typically what they'll do is they'll do a mix of free and paid. So they might say, okay, we use the Blue Moon leases. It says that you can't have a car here for more than 14 days in a month. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, maybe for the first 14 days, you can park here for free because that's what your lease says. But after those 14 days, they might give them a little bit more flexibility and say, hey, that same car can stay here another 7 days, but we're going to charge them $5 a night, right?
Hmm.
That's another income stream that can go back to the property, and that's a great kind of value add. And a third kind of NOI boost for our assets. So in the next month, we're going to be rolling out with our on-call parking solution citations.
Okay.
So our plan with parking citations is to lower the costs and the burden on the residents, right? Because it's hard enough, right, when they go through these challenges and their car gets towed, and maybe they didn't do what they were asked to do, right? And yeah, they should have listened, but it might make that hard for them to pay the rent that month, right? It might make
Okay.
it hard for them to feed their kids that day,
Right.
like there's a lot of nuances and things that go into it. So we've evaluated that, and we've said to ourselves, like, hey, what can we do that creates a different revenue stream for the assets? Because technically by law, we can't give, towing companies, booting companies, they can't give money back to the assets, but with citations, we're able to do it, right? So our intent is to roll out a citation program, put some money back in the asset owner's pocket, lower the overall burden on the resident, and just make it just a better kind of process with those sorts of things. So something that's new, it's
Interesting.
exciting, it's something that's going to be coming out
Very.
for us. So yeah, it's a good NOI boost.
When
So.
do you guys expect to roll that out?
So we're pretty much finalized from a tech perspective. So now it's more the legality stuff, right?
Okay.
Part of our mission is to make sure that the asset owners are protected. So we don't want to introduce and roll something out without saying, hey, like, we've done our due diligence, we've talked to our attorneys, like, this is what your signage has to say. This is what our terms and conditions have to say. Here's what we need to do to protect you. So we're finalizing all that stuff. So once that's finalized, I would say probably in the next month or so, my
Great.
rollout would probably be September 1 that we get this thing off the ground. Because like I said, tech wise, we're chomping at the bit, we're ready. And from a
That's
sales
awesome.
perspective also, but we got to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's. So,
That's great.
yeah,
That's great. So congrats on that to you
thanks.
and the
Yeah,
team.
thanks.
So how would you say, so we touched a little bit about boosting the NOI, obviously reducing the OpEx cost, that goes hand in hand. And then we're talking about the citations and how we're going to lower that overall cost for the residents.
Mhm.
Um, how would you say the residents react to, do you see more frequent where they do like it done internally, and they just don't deal with that part of it? Or would you say it's actually better to do via, setting up with you, setting up and then paying you directly through that website?
So I think it's a good question, right? I think that generally we see a higher percentage of our clients that want the residents to pay for it online through our system because it's a
Okay.
less of a layer on the property end of things, right? So
Okay.
I think that's a I think that's a better fit typically for them. But again, it depends on the market, right? Like if you're a mid-rise or a high-rise deal where everybody's already paying for assigned parking to have a car in the building,
Yep.
well, it may be easier since you're already collecting on your PMS system, which by the way, we have a nice solution that we can avoid that. But well, we can touch on that.
Love
But
that.
yeah, we can touch on that. But for now, right, the way that folks are doing it through the property management software, sometimes it's less wonky, right? If I'm already paying to park in the at the site, no matter how many cars I have, it's easier sometimes for us to just build a property and have them charge it back through the
Just charge
residents,
it
and they
back.
can just put that into their parking costs or however they want to handle it. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then in regards to the resident, the rules and regulations, I know that you're pretty good on adapting, right? What
Mhm.
those rules and regulations are going to be based on what you have for that community. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, so with our on-call parking service, one of our biggest things that we tell our clients is try to be as resident friendly as possible, right?
Okay.
The reality is we want compliance, right? We're not looking to kind of have, we're not trying to punish them in any way. We really want compliance with the parking rules and the regulations, right? So we coach our clients to say, hey, be a little bit more flexible, be a little bit more customized. And the good thing is with our software, we can do that. So we can do it at the license plate level or at the unit level for every single violation item that they check off. They can decide how they want to handle it. Now,
Okay.
that may not be the case if they're contracting like a towing company or a booting company to do their enforcement because these guys need to make their money somehow, right? So there's a little bit of that give and take, right? But as far as for our clients that utilize our on-call parking program, yeah,
Mhm.
we can be totally customized, totally resident friendly. So you want 2 warnings for an expired guest. If that same expired guest has been there and then the third time it gets towed or it gets a citation or whatever, it's fully customizable based on what the property needs, which I think is great because
That's
again, it gives them
amazing.
the control and the power of how they want to manage their own property.
And that's a great way to keep the resident satisfaction going.
Yeah.
So that's definitely there. So how is the team, your team, supporting the onboarding process, and how do you support, the implementation throughout the whole process? Because I know it might take 30 to 45 days to really roll it out. And then you still got some of those bad apples that are going to obviously show up within the first 60 days.
Yeah. So all of our staff speak Spanish and English, right? I
Awesome.
think that's very helpful for us too to kind of deal with some of the clients, especially like down in South Florida, right, where you have like maybe some of the language barriers or maybe some of that comfortability, right? So our team, the way our process typically works, we have like a resident orientation letter that we put together in English and in Spanish. We help with the onboarding process. We're actually working on an invite system now where we can actually take their rent roll, upload it into our tool, and auto invite all these residents where all they have to do is just click a link to say register my account, set their password, and then they can go in and add their vehicle information and do all of that stuff. So I think that helps. We have a direct account manager for each of our clients, which is also helpful, right? When you get a resident that's maybe a
Yep.
little bit upset and animated in the office, our on-site teams have a point of contact. They can text, call, email for themselves, right? The residents obviously have that layer of support too. And we're just there to kind of provide those extra layers and that extra help. We provide all the training and we don't charge for any of that stuff because we feel like, again, it's important that you understand how to use the product because the more you know and the more you feel comfortable with it, the less kind of problematic it may be down the road, right? Especially again, when you're
Correct.
dealing with that irate resident there in your face and in your office, right? We have these different layers to show, we've got all the, we show all the history on a particular license plate. So when you want to pull a report, you've got everything the resident did on that tag right there in the reports, and there's no guessing, right? It's
Right.
there. We see,
But that
hey,
never happens in
right,
multifamily,
no,
right? They
yeah, yeah,
never
no.
come in with that attitude.
Right, no.
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
exactly not, right? Everything's always perfect on their end. They never did anything wrong,
They
right?
never did
Sure.
anything wrong.
Right. Well, exactly.
But that's great. So, what about the red flags that you would say the operators should look for when evaluating their current parking strategy?
So I'll say one thing, right? Gates are a false sense of security. So
Okay.
when they say, "Oh, our parking is great. We have a gated system." I mean,
Commuted.
how many
Right.
times do people tailgated on a gate, bashed into the gate and now
All
it's
the
not working
time.
anymore, right? So that false sense of security I think that they get from gates of thinking like, hey, our property's secure, we know who lives there. Well, I'll give everyone here some food for thought, all right? All you have to do is set up a Google Voice number at the gate. You could forward it to as many numbers as you want. It's what I did. You just hit pound or 9 or
And it
whatever it is,
goes.
and I let myself right into the gate. I never had a problem getting in, and I wasn't on the lease, right? All you have
Right.
to do is set up one number on the call box that has a forwarder, problem solved, right? So I think that's something that folks think is like, hey, that it'll get me by because I'm gated, and you'd be surprised at how many gated properties that we obviously work with. And I guess other things would be them having the confidence of understanding that I know everybody that lives here at this property. I can guarantee you any of my properties that come online with our system, I will find at least 30 unauthorized occupants that have been living in your site. Why? Because
Wow.
it's really hard, right? Because the managers have so many things to do. They've got to worry about their variance reports. They have to worry about their reputation management. They have to worry about their move-ins. They have to worry about their staff and some of those challenges and maintenance tickets and work orders and all that stuff. So it's like you have all these things going on, and really a lot of times the properties are having the issues overnight, right? Where people are gone at work, it's not a big deal. But when people are
Yep.
coming back, even if you live on site, it's tough, unless you're in a really tiny property, it's hard for you to know all these nuances of who these vehicles are unless it is brought to your attention. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great, great points there. So, any quick wins that you would share with us?
well, I will say one thing that we just finalized integrations with a couple of companies. It's to use license plate reader cameras at the entrance and exits of the properties, where I think it's a great, like, kind of transformative approach when it comes to the parking and the technology. Where now every vehicle that shows up at the property gets scanned in, checked in. Every car that leaves the property gets scanned out, checked out, right?
Okay.
So what we can do is we could set grace period conditions, right, with our clients where they might say, hey, Matt, when the camera scans their plate coming in and they're not registered within 3 hours, we want to know about it, right? So now we can do real-time enforcement 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where maybe during their business hours they can set different alerting parameters, and then outside of their business hours, hey, we want to go into security, hey, we want to go to our tow company, hey, we want it to go to on-call, right? So there's so many different ways that you can kind of do things, but I think it's going to be a huge win for the industry, and I think it's going to be a huge value add where clients maybe,
Absolutely.
because we're always, I know we don't like to use this term with our residents, right? We're always looking at safety and security, right? And I know we don't like to let the residents know that, hey, there may be some opportunities to kind of make the properties safer. But I think these cameras really help with kind of some of those things, because some of these providers, they can link directly with PD. So if a vehicle of interest for like your local police department shows up and maybe you have a gang of folks that are coming in and cutting off the catalytic converters on the cars, right? That vehicle shows up at the property, gets scanned by the camera, automatically alerts to dispatch to say, hey, this vehicle just showed up at your property.
Absolutely.
So,
And we're talking about real time because
mm-hmm,
that is happening and we
mm-hmm.
know it's happened.
Yeah.
So these are real practical solutions that Matt is sharing here with us, and it's great. So what innovations or trends do you see shaping the future of the parking within the multifamily? And obviously with all the innovations and everything you're bringing out and you're rolling out, I think that that's going to be part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think like our goal as an organization, we're moving towards automation and we're moving towards like making it one less layer on the plate of the managers. Okay. They've got, and we alluded to it a little bit earlier, but you know, these managers have so many things on their plate and there's so much that's asked of them and so much that's expected of them that parking's kind of one of those things where, yeah, it can be a little bit nagging on them, but it's a layer they don't really want to deal with, right? So our goal as an organization, as far as like how the technology is moving forward, is to really make it where it's an all one-stop shop where everything can get managed, and we're actually providing kind of these full service solutions for our clients where they don't even have to manage the approving of the cars, they don't have to manage the updating of the leases, the integrations with the management softwares and that sort of stuff, where we can kind of automate a lot of these things for them in these processes where they don't really have to be involved unless it's a one-off scenario that maybe they want to talk to the resident because it goes outside of the bounds that we have kind of programmed, right? So I think those are, those are things that we're constantly doing from an innovation perspective. But one of the things is how we kind of make it more full service is we're going to be launching our assigned parking spot marketplace in
Okay.
November. Okay.
Wow,
So what that
thrilled.
helps do is, what we've recognized as a challenge is a lot of folks, they're charging for premium spaces and carports and detached garages all out of their PMS system, right?
That's
But
right.
what we're seeing as a challenge is, let's just say I'm a resident and maybe when I moved in 4 months ago, picked spot number 20. But spot number 25, that's closer to the bill or closer to the door, but something maybe that's closer to my unit came available. I want to be able to rent that spot. Well, now if they want to change spots, for one, they don't even know it's available, right? And it's not like the leasing team really has time to say, hey, this resident just moved out of this spot. This has become available. How does the whole property know? They don't really, right? And if they want to change spaces, now it requires new paperwork. So now your team has to spend all that extra time in doing all these things. So we've recognized that, Rob, and we said, okay, instead of them having to manage all that on their end, let us manage it on our side. So we have interactive parking maps that we can put together that are visual cues to the residents to say, hey, here's all the spots that are available at the property that you can rent right now if you wanted to, or here's some spots that maybe are premium that you would like but are unavailable. You can add yourself to the wait list. And what we can do essentially is we can help market these places and these spots to the residents, so that way they may not know it even exists. So let's just say, your parents are coming to visit you and you want them to have a carport while they're here. You can go ahead and, for the duration of their pass, you can go ahead and you can rent that carport, and the asset owner's making that extra money while it's not being long-term rented. So we can help them with the long-term rentals, short-term rentals of the parking spaces. So I think it's a great innovation
That's
that I
a
think is going to help
great
transform some of that
solution.
stuff. Yeah.
That's a great practical solution. And not only, I mean, just the strategic part about it, I think it's great.
Yeah.
I really think so. And I think, Matt, just talking about everything that you're bringing, I think that this is an ongoing issue
Mhm.
within the multifamily industry, the parking and then the residents being upset. And to your point, residents are always seeking how can it be closer to their unit, and I know here in Florida, if you've got garden style or even mid-rise, a lot of folks tend to go for the first floor units,
Mhm.
and they just want that convenience of
Mhm.
having the parking right there, maybe, I don't know, going out to their patio or going out to their balcony area and being able to see their vehicle right there. And it does sense, it gives them the sense of security,
Mhm.
right? Which we try to stay away from that. But
Mhm.
yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think everything that you're bringing on. So let's talk a little bit about what you were going to touch on earlier, which was your PMS system,
Mhm.
and how will that also benefit?
Yeah, so we're going to be, it's always a hot topic item, right? Every time I do a budget boot camp with a client, every time I talk to properties, they're like, "Oh, are you integrated? Are you integrated? Are you integrated?" And we had done some integrations with Yardi, with RealPage, with Entrata. We just found that the value, and maybe it's just the way that we were presenting it, maybe the way that we were executing it, we didn't find the value really to be that great for our clients, especially for the amount of money that we had to spend to do these integrations, which for any of the PMS systems that are listening or watching the podcast here, just you
Take a
guys
note.
you guys charge an arm and a leg, and I think it's insane, especially for the for the vendor side, right? Because we're really trying to, it's a big ask by the properties, but it's a big financial burden too for us. However, I think that now we've been able to engineer a solution that we think is going to work like perfectly for our clients. And I think those integrations with the management softwares, we're going to start it at the beginning of the year to reopen it. I mean, we've already done a lot of the legwork, but again, it's reopening it, and kind of, we're in the process right now of doing surveys with our clients. So these surveys are going to tell us the big picture of like, hey, is this something you want us to move forward on? I feel pretty confident it is. And again, it just goes through that whole automation part. The less we have to put on their plate, the better, right? If I can manage all these things. And going back to the assigned parking, one of the key features that we have is the ability for a resident to self-report somebody that's in their spot that's not supposed to be. How inconvenient is it for me as a resident? I'm paying $200 a month to rent your spot. Maybe I'm at a high rise in Miami, right? It's expensive.
Yep.
I come home and there's always a car parked in my spot. Well, how do I get rid of it, right? It's 12:30 at night. The management office is closed. Now I got to call the tow company. I may not get a hold of them, right? It's a process, right? So for us to have this self-report tool that's in our system, and what we'll do is if we recognize the license plate of the car that they're submitting, we'll actually email, call, and text that person to say, hey, if you're still up right now, right, you're parked in someone's spot, you need to move your car right now. Otherwise, the tow company's going to come get it. So it gives that kind of conflict resolution much faster than what's being done right now presently when somebody's in somebody's spot, right? Because you're catching an earful as a manager the next morning, and what are you supposed to do at 12:30 at night, right? So
Yeah.
that's where, having these digital solutions, these automated processes really makes life a heck of a lot easier.
It does. It absolutely does. And I think from a compliance point of view, I think it's a layer that the property management industry really needs,
Hmm.
because it's going back to what you said, the property managers, and even today, I think we're expecting a lot more from the property managers, and from an operator's point of view and a perspective, I really think that property managers is it's just multitasking every day. And
Hmm.
you come in with a to-do list, and sometimes you don't even get to that to-do list. So to your point, your product is going to be able to really support that day-to-day operation for that on-site team. Those both, everybody who's on the grounds is going to be able to understand, and then they're going to be able to execute and support the product as well. So I think it's going to be a win-win
Yeah.
working with you.
Because imagine, right? You have all these vehicles are changing on a daily basis. Let's just say you're running a 300 unit property, right? You have well over 450 resident cars that are parked at your site. There's so many moving parts when it comes to that, right? Somebody just changed their lease out and now they've got a new lease vehicle, right? How are you
That's right.
managing these things? Now I got to get them a new sticker, right? It's a challenge, right? Or hey, I had new move-ins and it's different people coming in and trying to break the rules, right? So it's like,
Yep.
oh, the unauthorized occupants don't stop, the second you implement the system. It's like ongoing kind of protection mechanism. And we have AI built into our system now where we're actually telling our properties when we think a particular unit is Airbnb or doing a VRBO, right? We're catching that because we're looking at their patterns and we're saying,
Something's off here.
we think this person might be up to no good, right? I think they might have sublet their unit and maybe they're running an Airbnb. We don't know what they're doing here, but we think something's happening. So it's good.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's good to be able to kind of be upfront, be preventive with these things, right? Because again, they have so many moving parts. They can't keep their eyes on this at all times, and that's where we're trying to kind of
Agreed.
make it much simpler.
Agreed. So, talking about, we've talked a little bit about everything that not only are you going to roll out, but everything that you already have going on right now.
Hmm.
What would you say, to someone who is having right now a parking, a real issue with the parking ratio, with the unregistered? And I am certain that if they're having their registered residents come in and say, I never find parking, there's a lot of unauthorized occupants there.
Yeah,
At least that's been my lesson learned
yeah.
with gated communities.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
I would say my advice to them, right, is take a deep breath. Okay, we have there's technology that's out there, right? We can help fix it. And I would definitely encourage them to reach out to like a provider like ours to say, hey, like help me. Every property is different. Every property has their different nuances, right? So we can set the business model that makes the most sense for them and the client, right? If it's a third party deal or whether it's an owner operated program, we can talk about where maybe some of that NOI is, right? And we can talk about what we think in our expertise, right? I mean, I started the company 10 years ago. I would like to think now at this point that I've got a good level of experience with our clients because I'm still very actively involved where it's not like I just have my sales team going out there and doing all these presentations, and I very actively sell myself, right? Because I like to be in there and I like to hear from the clients. I like to know, like I was in Denver last week doing a budget boot camp, and it was amazing, again, sitting in front of these managers, listening to their issues, right? And with some of those use cases and constantly trying to figure out what we can do to help them, right? So I would say, reach out to us, let us know what we can do to help you. I can consult and kind of say, hey, this is what I think might be the best for you. And I know you asked this a little bit earlier and I didn't fully answer it, but it's amazing to me when we have residents that are the ones recommending our product to new properties that they're moving into, right? And it's always a great feeling for me where yes, does it cost the residents money on their end to fund the program, right? Yeah, it does. But at the end of the day, though, we're providing them that sense of value. So when you get a resident that's going to a new property saying, oh man, you did this old decal way of doing things,
This
or
is
like,
not the
this
way
is
to do
not
it.
good. You should call these guys. 'Cause I had them at my last property and I thought that it was a really, really good solution for me. So you'd be amazed at how many I get of even property managers that were guests at somebody's unit that calls us the next day saying, hey, I had a great experience using your tool. I want to learn more about this because I think my association or I think my property would benefit from this. So it's a nice feel good, I guess, when the residents are going through and kind of making those recommendations to use our
Absolutely.
product. So
Yeah, I think from, so not only from an operator's point of view, but even from the resident's point of view, yes, maybe there is a time where, they've come home and somebody is in their parking spot and they have to go through that bad experience in the beginning.
mhm,
But then your product is going to make the execution well-rounded, and it's going to make them feel safe. It's going to make them feel, resident satisfaction
mhm,
at the end of the night. And I
yeah,
think that that's really going to help.
yeah,
And then that when the property manager comes in the following day, or the assistant property manager, and she's reviewing her dashboard, and this was taken care of, and she's doing a follow-up call, she's going to have, yes, he or she is going to give that
Mhm.
feedback, but at the end it's going to be overall positive feedback.
Right.
So I definitely agree with you. I think that that's definitely, word of mouth is great, and continuously to
Mhm.
go throughout the different communities. So talking about a little bit, so you do not only Florida, but over 30 states,
Mhm.
correct? And you have 24/7 support. Is that
Yeah, so we
how it's
have
working right now?
yeah, so there's two different kind of packages that we offer for the clients depending on the
Okay.
market that they're in, right? So on-call parking is our full service suite. So what that is it's our parking pass software plus services, right? So those services consist of our overnight enforcement team that goes out and checks the cars, make sure people are being compliant, and then also includes the layer of the 24/7 customer call center, English, Spanish. They can text us, email us, live chat with us, and talk to us on the phone, and then we'll deal with them with whatever questions that they have. And again, it alleviates some of the pressure from the management team. So that's with our on-call parking product, and then our parking pass system. That's our other package where clients will use this just for our software, and then they have a different vendor that they want to use for their patrolling and that sort of support level. So, we have dedicated account managers for every client that works with us. And so it just kind of depends on what package and depends on what market. So the reason why we have Parking Pass as a package is because I don't have to go hire staff to go do the enforcement in all these different markets. We can work with local staff that's already there. We train them and teach them how to do the patrolling. And then from there, they run what they need to do. They can do the scanning of the plates through our patrol app. They can type the plates in if they want to. They can do whatever they need to kind of get a big picture and help kind of maintain the property. So yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of different solutions that are there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So from the time that you roll out, we do the onboarding, the implementation, we're rolled out. And then obviously most of the time residents renew 6 months, 8 months, well,
Mhm.
sometimes you even seven, nine, 11 months, 12 months.
Yeah.
But say it's a year,
Mhm.
right? Say it's 12-month
Mhm.
renewals. How do we keep the compliance portion, or the auditing of that compliance, in between that time
Yeah.
frame of the lease term?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously with the regular enforcement on everything, we have it always where their permits expire with their leases, which is good, right? So it's like, hey, you can't. It's not one of those programs where, hey, I purchased my parking permit for my license plate and I'm good to go now for a year from the date that I purchased it. No, we'll prorate it and marry it based on when your lease expires. So that way, there's more of that control, right? So our intent with the integrations with the property management systems is we can have some automated updating of the leases, right? So that way, as soon as their new lease gets inputted in the PMS system, it automatically updates in our program, but just helps kind of maintain from that level, right? So, and I think some of the misconceptions too with some of our clients is like they think, oh, okay, the first 60 days you're seeing probably the biggest change in results, right? You've got your rollouts usually 30 days, right? Depending on the size of the asset. And then after that, I'd say another 30 days of really kind of hitting the hammer over the head with the residents and
Yep.
really fully getting them in full compliance, right? So at that point, after 60 days, you're, depending on what your occupancy is, obviously for your site, I mean, you're at 95% occupied within our program of, hey, most of the residents have done their registrations. They've done what we asked them to do. And, that's not where the work stops, right? It's constant involvement. It's constant going through and running the license plates and checking the cars because, again, there's so many moving parts. You might have 30 different move-ins every month, right? That's
That's right.
30 different people that aren't used to what the rules are, that are used to doing things a different way, maybe at a different property where they didn't take it as serious. So, there's always that compliance that's going on like on a regular basis.
And I'm sure for the lease ups, right? When you've got a lease up, and for example, in my experience, I know pre-leasing efforts is extremely important, and we usually execute the lease agreements prior to even opening up to the public. So it's really good to contact Matt even during that time frame. So you could have that locked in, and you could be able to, go ahead and pre-register them and have that rolled out even before they're operating.
And one thing I'll say to the lease up managers too, I know you guys really, really want your bonuses, and I know that it's critical, right, that we hit these occupancy numbers. But it is really a great idea to have a plan before it even gets started, so that way residents aren't creating bad habits, right? Obviously, I deal with a lot of stabilized properties where we convert them into a more digital system. It is always a bit tougher with a stabilized asset to bring them into the system as opposed to dealing with a lease up property where you're setting that standard, then expectation right off the bat. and it's a great idea, obviously. And I don't think we get enough of that product planning, right? I feel like a lot of the developers and a lot of the asset owners that are, going through the lease up phase, they think, oh, occupancy, making sure that they're filling these units, making sure that they've got their COI and everything like that. But my biggest thing is like, hey, take that time to, develop a plan for your parking before it even becomes a thing, right? They think, okay, I'm going to lease this up. I'll deal with my parking challenge once it's there. But it's like, being a little bit proactive sometimes can be better. And I've found that it's really nice. I mean, I have clients that I've been with them since lease up and we're still with them and it's been fantastic. And their residents are so ingrained with the process that it's never been a thing because they've used this from the inception of the property. So,
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. We're so focused on that occupancy and how to drive the occupancy, and we're forgetting, right, what's going to happen once you hit that 40%, 50%, 60%, and then you're going to have to implement it. So I think, definitely plan, organize, execute. You're going to have much better results,
mhm,
overall much better results.
mhm,
But so a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about driving the NOI. We've talked a little bit about automation. We've talked about your amazing product, what you're going to roll out in September, and how we're going to continue helping the multifamily operators, the property managers, and the residents, and keep the resident satisfaction.
mhm.
And anything before we go for today, anything else that you want to add that maybe I haven't touched on?
Um, Great question. I usually have a ton of things to go on, but
So
I mean,
let's do it.
it was a good. I mean, it was a. We talked about a lot of really great things, and I think our biggest thing, when it comes to the automation, is just layering everything together, right? You can use the license plate reader cameras as a tool, and another thing actually that we didn't touch on technology wise, but I think is going to be really interesting. I actually have some meetings tomorrow with a
Okay.
company that provides hardware for gate access systems. So essentially, the way that it works is we're going to create a digital gate pass opener that's on your phone. So if you have a friend that's coming over and like, hey, I'm in the middle of a podcast right now.
There
I
you
can't
go.
get to my phone to let you into the gate. So how do I do it, right? So we're looking at those kind of technologies to say, okay, well, hey, Matt might be busy right now, but my guest was texted a digital gate pass button on their phone that they have for the duration of their guest pass. So if my parents want to go out and do some shopping and groceries and whatever, they don't, we don't have as much congestion at the gate. They just tap the button on their phone, it opens the gate and they go in.
That's great.
And it's only available security wise while they have their guest pass. So it's not like something like, hey, permanently my parents can always open in the gate, right? So those technologies are
Wow.
things, again. Yeah.
Okay. And is that already rolled out, or is
So
that
we
going to be
have
rolled out
Yeah, so we
in
have the
September?
we have the capability now. We have integrations with some of the gate suppliers to kind of do it without the hardware side. But what I'm really
Okay.
trying to do is there's so many different technologies that are out there, and it's really tough from a planning perspective to get integrated with everybody. So if I can get a hardware solution that just gets installed at their gate where I can kind of bypass all the other stuff that the gates are doing,
All
I
right.
can just trigger the opening of the gate based on a signal that's being sent from the button, right? So all that stuff. So
Great.
yeah.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll make sure to put in and share all the info on Matt so you could contact Matt and get your parking solution done today. This is going to be a game changer for you. So make sure you reach out to Matt. His info is going to be, I'm going to link it below. And if there's any other questions, you could reach out to Matt. He's always available and he's always ready to give you that solution. Anything
Of
else,
course.
Matt?
No, I really appreciate the time and thanks for giving us that spotlight to kind of, again, I think it's a good topic and I think it's something that maybe isn't a hot item, maybe even for some of the NAA talks and groups and what I see out there in media. And I do think that this is I think people maybe underestimate so many of the different technologies that exist in the parking management and solution world of things that now it's kind of hopefully I've got everybody's brain racking where they're like, oh man,
Oh
I didn't
man.
think about some of these things and now maybe I can implement these. So
So you can't just focus on one side. When you're in this industry, you can't focus just on the occupancy or just, everything is hand in hand and it's like a domino effect. And the compliance part is really, really important, whether you're doing an acquisition, a disposition, or you've got a stabilized asset or a lease up up. So make sure you contact Matt today. His team's going to take care of you. It's going to be a great onboarding process. He's going to be able to give you those practical solutions. And thank you, Matt.
Of
Thank
course.
you for coming in today and just sharing all these valuable insights with us.